Well, welcome along to the Gary Neville podcast. It's a special edition today in which later on we'll be paying tribute to Sir Bobby Charlton, whose death was sadly announced earlier today. Gary and I have been at Stamford Bridge, which was where Sir Bobby actually made his final appearance for Manchester United. And we've taken in the Chelsea against Arsenal match, which finished 2-2 and was a real thriller, Gary.
Yeah, it ended up that way. It was really good from Chelsea for probably 75, 80 minutes, and then obviously that mistake from Sanchez let Arsenal back in it. But it's rare that you would say that both teams will probably go away happy tonight. I think Chelsea happy that they've put in a really good performance and they've shown sort of like a blueprint of what maybe the future could look like. They've still got a problem up front. They haven't got a striker. And I still think they've got a problem potentially, obviously, with Thiago Silva's age. He's so important for them, but he's 39, as you pointed out to me in commentary, not 40. And then the goalkeeper, the question is to whether the goalkeeper can step up to be a top goalkeeper. But you can see that midfield, you can see in wide areas, they're bright. The full-backs, I thought Cucurella and Gusto did well today, and they're the second full-backs, by the way. So there was something like a real performance today. Structurally, defensively, they were fantastic. I thought the way in which they went from 4-4-2 defensively, and then they had that sort of split wide players, what Brighton do with, then they had Gallagher and Palmer coming back into sort of number 10 positions. It really sort of shocked Arsenal, and then out of possession, they couldn't get the ball into Ødegaard, Arsenal, because of Chelsea's four that were there, Gallagher, Palmer, Caicedo and Fernandes. It was really good. Maurizio Pochettino is a top coach. I think he'll enjoy developing these players. There's improvements in some of them. You can see it out there. Mudryk in particular, I think, will be happier out of today. So I'm sure he's giving them a very positive message in that dressing room right now, and probably reminding them that, concentration, making mistakes. Gusto's just switched up at the back post on the cross from Saka for Trossard's goal, and then obviously the goalkeeper. So mistakes like that can cost you, but they were the better team out there today, and Arsenal have had to work hard. And then from Arsenal's perspective, they'll be happy because they've got away with one. They haven't played well. They've been nowhere near the best. Their two centre-halves looked as shaky as I've seen them for a bit, but to still pull a point away from a game like that is really good for Arsenal, I think.
Howard Webb and his officials would probably tell you that handball is the most difficult thing to judge. Where do your sympathies lie with the one that Arsenal gave away? Do they lie with Saliba?
Yeah. And look, we've got this thing about unnatural position and making your body bigger. For me, that's when you're blocking a shot. And you're a defender, you're here, just watch me. You're blocking a shot. If your arm's up there as you're blocking a shot, then I think you're asking for trouble. If your arm's up here, you're dead. You definitely got a penalty. But as you jump for a ball, you know what I mean? Your arms come up. I'm sorry, I'm a defender. I've been doing it for sort of 25, 30 years, and every time you go up, you're told to, you can't not jump. Do a squat jump in the gym. A long jumper, their arms come up, they swing with you because that's your leverage, that's how you get maximum height. So the idea that Saliba, who to be fair, is trying to block the shot, that's not happened. And I don't think it is. The Michael Keane one was very similar earlier on in the sort of day at the derby, the Merseyside derby, but different that one because it came from the ball on the ground and it's come across, whereas Saliba's jumping for a ball, he's a bit desperate because he realises that Mudryk's got across him. And I just feel a lot of sympathy. I saw on social media that John Terry said something similar. John Terry is a massive Chelsea fan, but he's a centre-back. He's a defender. We have sympathy with defenders who are jumping with their arms sort of up the sort of shoulder height because that's what you do. That's just natural. So I've got sympathy for Saliba, but I wasn't surprised, to be fair, as soon as we saw it on the VAR screens that we have here, that the referee was going to get called over to the screen.
It's almost that referees are expecting defenders to act like goalkeepers these days in the way that they come out with their arms. Yeah. But talking of goalkeepers, David Raya is going to be very much in the focus again for the second Chelsea goal. You obviously feel that this is a problem that Mikel Arteta has brought on himself.
I do. Well, look, if a goalkeeper makes mistakes, then that's the goalkeeper's problem, but the problem is there's a very good goalkeeper in the waiting who hasn't done anything wrong yet this season, and he was left out of a game a month or so ago. Surprised us all. We thought it might be for a couple of games, but it looks like David Raya now is the number one. The problem is David Raya, he started to look a little nervy in the last few games. He started to make mistakes. And I've been there. I've been there at United where we've had two equal goalkeepers, and you sort of the manager changed one, then he brought the other one in, and this was the greatest manager of all time. It was when Roy Carroll and Tim Howard were there. People might say, oh, they're not as good as Raya and Ramsdale. It doesn't really matter. You've got two goalkeepers who are of equal ability, and you don't know which one's your number one. You've got an issue. You've got an issue. Trust me, you've got an issue. It happened a little bit with England when Tim Flowers was doing brilliantly for Blackburn and David Seaman was there, but quite clearly Terry Venables named David Seaman as his number one. He was adamant. So I think that there is a problem brewing here whereby Ramsdale's going to start knocking on the door and say, get me back in, and if he doesn't, he's going to have to leave. So even though it looks like there's competition for places in the goalkeeping position, it won't last long, this. The maximum will be a season, because the goalkeeper who's not playing or feels hard done to will end up leaving and want to play Premier League football or football in a top league. And I don't think it can work, and there's nothing I'm seeing that say it can work. And I also think it puts more pressure on the one that's in, because he knows the other guy's waiting in the wings, who's very good. So to me, I think that, yeah, Raya's got to settle down. He's a good goalkeeper. Ramsdale's a good goalkeeper. They've got two very good ones, but I suspect the whole pressure of the situation, caused by me, you, everybody else talking about it on a constant basis, but ultimately caused by Mikel Arteta. He's the one that's brought this situation upon himself by having these two excellent goalkeepers that he sees as being a good problem to have. I don't think it's a good problem in that position. I know in every other position you want good competition for places, but when you've got two goalkeepers that are undermining each other by the fact that they're both good and one makes a mistake, then you look at the other one on the bench and our cameras throw to me, it just isn't healthy in that position. You need to give that goalkeeper in that position the strength of mind, you're my number one, and give him that comfort. And then change him at the end of the season if you don't think he's your number one, and let the other one go, if you know what I mean. But don't have both of them there. That's my view.
Is there a problem across the Premier League landscape in that people have seen what Edison has done and have now become obsessed with goalkeepers who are good with their feet, and therefore the other basics of goalkeeping have almost been sidelined?
Yeah, it was his position. I mean, he had a couple of problems with his feet as well, but it was his positioning on that goal that was the problem. He was out of position. He didn't reset himself. There was one in the first half that I don't think he reset himself for as well, if I remember rightly. That to me, honestly, what would I say is the most important characteristic for me as a goalkeeper is that they dominate the area and they dominate their box. They look huge in the goal. That when there's a cross comes in, they catch it and they come out and dominate it or punch it miles away. To me, that's what I want as a defender from a goalkeeper. Now, I accept today they have to also be good with their feet, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can have both. Alisson, Edison, and got other goalkeepers in the world, and we seem to sort of like be, yeah, but he's good with his feet, but that seems to that doesn't excuse the fact that they're in poor positions or they let goals in that they shouldn't. So you have to be good with both. But for me, the most important characteristic, and maybe it's a traditional thought process, is that I would always want a goalkeeper who's an unbelievable shot stopper, who's dominant on crosses, who basically doesn't get caught up on corners with other players around, just gets them out of the way and comes and catches. They're, to me, the most important characteristics as a defender, and I still think they would be today for most defenders out there. You'd forgive the odd bad pass or the odd boot long if they didn't want to play out through the middle, except in these goalkeepers are all pretty good with their feet. I think I've told the story quite a few times now about in Spain, where the goalkeepers joined in every part of the actual outfield session and then did the goalkeeping work at the end because they saw it as being of equal importance. Whereas in England, the goalkeepers only joined with the football part in the last bit. They used to do the goalkeeping work for the first 45 minutes of the session. So that's something that flipped on its head for me when I went away with it to Valencia for those 4 months. It completely transformed how I saw goalkeeping. But I still think the shot-stopping bit and the dominating of your area is crucial to create that composure and lack of anxiety in the ground. You don't want your goalkeeper flapping like he was on the corner, Sanchez, before. You don't want your goalkeeper getting involved in those things. You just don't. You want them just to be calm and deal with it. And that's what Edison and Alisson do. They're world-class, Edison and Alisson.
But all that being said, even with the problems that Raya had, Arsenal are now 9 games unbeaten, and even though they didn't play well, does the fact that they've got something out of the game kind of back up your opinion, which you expressed a few weeks ago, that you think Arsenal could win the title this season? Yeah,
that gives me more. I mean, today they've been really poor, but that gives me more confidence that they will win the league today by the fact they've come back and salvaged a point out of a game where they were well below par. They were well below par. That's the worst I've seen Arsenal play. Credit to Chelsea, by the way, in which they defended, by the way. A lot of it was to do with Chelsea as well. But it's the worst I've seen Arsenal on the ball for a long time. They really struggled in the game. They couldn't create a chance. They didn't have a shot on target for 70 odd minutes. And Declan Rice's goal was fantastic, by the way, even though it was a mistake. It was a brilliant goal. But I think it's a really good point for Arsenal. I think they'll go into that dressing room today and they'll wake themselves up and say, come on, that wasn't good enough. But I'll tell you what, it doesn't half feel good when you get a point away at a big ground. You can always lose at Stamford Bridge, at Anfield, at the Etihad, at the Emirates, these grounds. You can always lose at these grounds as a big club when you go to each other's. So the fact that you've not played well but you've stolen a point is a brilliant feeling, and I think that will give them confidence.
And just a brief look at what happened elsewhere today. Manchester City back on track. They and Liverpool both won. For City, I suppose the sending off of Akanji could come back to haunt them at a later date. But beating Brighton, not to be sniffed at.
No, and the Manchester Derby is next Sunday, so the important after international break. They've had players all around the world that to get back into it and win. And Brighton are a tough team to play against. They can pop it through you, and Chelsea today, Maurizio Pochettino, that was De Zerbi's tactics when they were in possession. It was a classic De Zerbi. It was fantastic. It was a fantastic result for City in some ways. That you get obviously Akanji sent off's a problem. I know they were 2-0 up, then Brighton come back to 2-1, but they're an awkward customer, Brighton, that can catch you out if you're not right. And City's last few results have been a little bit sort of up and down, so it's important that they got off the back of this international break with a victory, and they've done that. And it's the Manchester Derby next week, so we'll see what happens with that.
And I think you saw a bit of the Merseyside derby, didn't you, before coming here?
Yeah, I thought Everton did quite well in the sense of, sometimes I've seen Everton go there and capitulate, and I actually thought Liverpool were below par. They weren't at the best. They were helped by the sending off, obviously. Ashley Young, no doubt about that, but they still did quite well with the 10 men, and I think Canate was lucky. I left at 1-0. So I saw the penalty, Michael Keane, and then obviously Salah scored it, and then I left. I didn't see the last part of the game. I came here, but it's a good result for Liverpool. But I think Everton I don't think Everton will be too downbeat after that performance. I think they'll think there was some positives came out of it. I've seen them there a lot worse.
Well, we're speaking here now ahead of the Sheffield United-Manchester United match, which is this evening. But ahead of that game, obviously things have been overshadowed with today's news about the death of Sir Bobby Charlton, an iconic figure. Let's start with his playing career. I know it's hard to compare across eras, but is there a case for saying that he's the greatest English footballer of all time?
I think he is the greatest English football player of all time. The winning of the World Cup, the winning of the Ballon d'Or, the winning of the European Cup, the impact that he's had on English football, winning all those trophies, but also just his longevity at Manchester United, playing over 750 games, which is just unbelievable, over 100 games for England. You think about the fact of his journey as a youth player, and it's that really sort of, I always think of those 3 consecutive FA Youth Cups, and Manchester United won them. Duncan Edwards won 3 consecutive Youth Cups as well. But that's where Manchester United, it was built on the principle of the Youth Cup. The FA Youth Cup when I joined in 1991-92 was everything at that club. They hadn't won it for some time, but it was everything. It was a big trophy. And Manchester United, I think, won it the first 5 years in existence in the 50s, early 50s and mid-50s. And Sir Bobby Charlton was part of that. And when you think of the Busby Babes and what that sort of created at Manchester United, this belief in youth and opportunity, and he was the greatest representative of that in the sense that he survived the Munich air crash, that great tragedy where obviously he lived through it, and he obviously lost so many of his teammates and colleagues, and then how he obviously recovered with the rest of the club to be able to come through that in the early 60s and the mid 60s to win titles, but then to go on and win 10 years later the European Cup at Wembley is absolutely incredible. And obviously Sir Bobby Charlton is an icon, he's a legend, those words that get used, he is the genuine legend of Manchester United. He's the only player that's played for the club that's ever had a stand named after him. I know Sir Alex Ferguson has got one, but he didn't play for the club, he managed the club. He's got the statue out front with George Best and Dennis Law, the 3 greatest names in Manchester United's history, the 3, sort of the godfathers, if you like, of what Manchester United is. And when you go there as a young player and you hear the story of the Busby Babes and you hear the story of the Blazers, the club blazer that the Busby Babes wore, and the sort of the expectation of discipline and hard work, the Cliff training ground in Salford and Littleton Road and all those places where the Busby Babes grew up, Bobby Charlton lived to tell the story through the eras, the great eras of Manchester United, of Sir Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson, because he came to every single match. When I was there, he was in the dressing room after every single match. Now, all the directors were. He wasn't the only director. But you think of his stability and his guidance in those early years of Sir Alex Ferguson, when you could see what Sir Alex was doing behind the scenes with the youth system, when you could see the principles that Sir Alex Ferguson was putting in place, when many wanted him gone. And he was one of the stalwarts. He was one of the ones that, in the boardroom, along with obviously Martin Edwards, that said, no, this is something's happening here. There's some foundations being built, and there's no doubt how important he was. Sir Alex has spoken about how important he was to have that thread of history running through the club and that football experience and knowledge. And then I always think of him in '99, the tear in his eye, sort of when we won the Champions League in the new camp, and you always remember that picture of him, that sort of footage of him where he's got the tear in his eye, and you think, you know, he travelled with us in Europe. He used to train the night before the game with us in the boxes. You know, the little boxes that we used to do, the rondos they call them now, we used to call them boxes, where you have the 8 players on the outside, the 2 in the middle, and he'd be one, you know, Sir Alex Ferguson would join in one box and he would join in the other. And this was well into his 50s, you know, training with us and joining in with us, and that spirit of the club lived through Sir Bobby Charlton, that representation of what the club meant. And I know I sometimes get criticised when I talk about, you know, this is Manchester United and what a Manchester United player is. But it was these people, Sir Bobby Charlton, Brian Kidd, Nobby Stiles, Sir Alex Ferguson, who explained to us what a Manchester United player was and what was expected of you on and off the pitch. And I think he's the greatest ambassador for Manchester United on and off the pitch that has ever lived. And he's also, I think, the greatest ambassador and icon of English football that's ever lived.
Because I suppose really he was central to the story of why Manchester United have a global following, the outpouring of sympathy after Munich, the build back to the European Cup, as you've mentioned, 10 years later, and as you say, even in the treble years, still an involvement with the club.
It's unimaginable that what those players went through, what the staff went through at the club, what the people at the club, the fans went through when obviously the Munich air crash happened, and they had to go out and play again a few weeks later, and their mates, their best mates, almost like brothers growing up together, playing in the youth teams from 13, 14, 15, and you've got to go out there and carry on and play. You talk about resilience and robustness and character and personality, these great traits that we all want in our children and in sort of all the people that we come across in life. They had it in abundance, but they also had skill and talent and humility. And Sir Bobby carried all those characteristics throughout his life. He was always humble. He was a gentleman. I did many appearances with him sort of as an ambassador as well whilst I was at the club, where you'd go and sort of meet dignitaries and people like that. And he was the perfect role model of how you should behave as a football player on the pitch and you should behave as a football player off the pitch. He was rightly knighted for his achievements in the game. He also set up Sir Bobby Charlton Soccer School, which was obviously a legacy play for him beyond his football career, which had an impact on so many young people. We saw Jamie Redknapp earlier on today talking about attending the Sir Bobby Charlton Soccer School. David Beckham, they found David Beckham, that soccer school. You know, there's pictures of a young 12-year-old David Beckham with Sir Bobby Charlton at his soccer school. So you think of the impact that he was having during his career, but the impact that he continued to have beyond his career was something special. And his standards were everything. And there's a little story, I've never forgotten this. We were playing against Bradford at Old Trafford, and you'd have to look for the game, and I'm sure the sort of statisticians will. We were winning 6-0 and it was a night game. It was right near the end of the game, and there I am, young. I think I was probably 20, 21 years of age. I was actually playing centre-back, left centre-back, on the stand side facing the Stretford end, so I was on the dugout side. Right near the end of the game, and there was a Bradford player broke down the left-hand side, so the right-hand side, my left, and I went over and absolutely clattered him at 6-0. And I remember the crowd going, hey! And I never thought anything of it. You know, that was what you did. You were Gary Neville, you had to go and tackle and you had to go and get stuck in. And to be fair, I hit the lad hard, and to be fair, gave a foul away. And he came and pulled me in the dressing room after a game. He said, can I have a word with you? And he said, we don't do that. He said, we show class. And I have to say that was something that I always remember to this day, because obviously, you know, I played under Sir Alex Ferguson and say Eric Harrison, Nobby Stiles, and they were always get stuck in, get wide in, and that was that sort of message that you get from some of the people that you came across at Manchester United, but then you had this sort of different approach of Bobby Charlton, who was so graceful and always wanted the club to represent itself well. And he came and had a word with me and said, we don't do that. We act with class, because he said, you shouldn't at 6-0 up. You didn't need to go and do that. And it always stuck with me. It was almost like a telling off, really, from sort of like, your father or your grandfather at the time. But I always remember him coming into the games, into the dressing room. I suspect it was always very easy for directors to come into our dressing room after victories, and very difficult for them to come in, particularly with Sir Alex and the way he was after a defeat and the way we were after a defeat. But Sir Bobby Charlton would come in, and quite often remember him coming round and, keep your head up, son. Next week there's a game. He always put things into perspective. There was never an emotional reaction. It was always something that you would always balanced. And you just like to say, I'm going to repeat what I said. He's the greatest representation of English football and Manchester United, I think, that has ever lived. And the tributes that we've seen today from everybody in the game are fully deserved.
Because some managers wouldn't like directors talking directly to players, would they? But nobody was going to argue, bearing in mind his credentials. Did he wear those credentials well? I mean, presumably he wasn't sort of boastful about the fact that he'd won every major honour in the game. He hid that well.
I have to say, I worked very close with Nobby Stiles, with Brian Kidd, European Cup winners, World Cup winners, and obviously was, exposed to Sir Bobby Charlton on a regular basis at our matches when he used to come in the dressing room. But he was a director, so I wasn't working with him directly every single day, but he carried the club. He was an ambassador for the football club at all times. You always got the feeling that, that line of, you don't just represent Manchester United when you play for them, you represent when you leave the building, when you leave the stadium. And I got the impressions from Sir Bobby. In fact, I know from Sir Bobby, he felt that way. He lived like that. And he was adored, obviously, all around the grounds in the country that he used to go to. And it's right, a club like Manchester United should have fantastic ex-players involved at the club, making sure that there is a sort of understanding and a thread. And he carried that really well. And we've seen at some clubs it can work and some clubs it doesn't work. But I have to say, at Manchester United, he's been the perfect person to sort of transport the values and principles of United, sort of from, if you like, the 1950s when he joined, right the way through to sort of, if you like, 2000 and sort of 15 to 20, when he probably will have stopped going to matches in the last few years. There's no doubt he was the sort of, if you like, shining beacon of standard and principle and value that you always would want to look at if you were talking about what you want to try and achieve in the game.
And we shouldn't overlook what he did with England, because, of course, every subsequent generation has tried and failed. He got the goal that got England to the World Cup final, was a big part of the team that actually won that day for Alf Ramsey's side. So, again, just another remarkable layer to his career.
Oh, I mean, that's what I'm saying to you. How many players in history have won the Champions or the European Cup, the World Cup, and the Ballon d'Or, and the United? And I still throw those three youth cups in, because I think of that sort of, if you like, those embryonic years and how he established the principle of what United is in giving. I think it's something, I don't know the exact stat, but I think it's something like 70 or 80 years there's been a homegrown product in Manchester United's matchday squad. That was born out of that era. That was born out of those lads. That was born out of Sir Bobby Charlton. And you think of what he achieved for England. I mean, winning the World Cup, I went to 3 World Cups as a player and a coach, and 5 European Championships. Got to a couple of semi-finals, but never once got over the line. He got over the line. His teammates and him got over the line with Sir Alf Ramsey. And you can never underestimate how big that was at the time for our country. I know how big it would be now if we even got close. We did do a couple of years ago in 2020 where we got close to winning a major tournament. And it would mean everything to us in this country, but they did it. He did it, and he achieved everything that you can in the game, an elite performance level, the very best. So not just like sort of like this is everything. Ballon d'Or. English players don't win the Ballon d'Or. Sir Bobby Charlton did. He won the Ballon d'Or, the greatest, the one that Messi wins, the one that sort of Ronaldo wins, the one that the greatest players of all time win. He won it. So he obviously was a phenomenal player, and obviously never saw him play live. But you see some of the goals and some of the sort of the moments in games that he had, and I say it was I think Jamie Redknapp summed it up very well when he talked about the heavy boots, the heavy pitches, the bobbly pitches, the leather balls that got soaking wet, and he was able to leather them, smash them, rocket them from 30 yards into the top corner. And how he used to do that, I have no idea, because I couldn't do it with one of the modern balls from today.
He did try management. I think he would probably admit that it wasn't what he was cut out for. Had that brief spell at Preston. Do you think because he knew how tough the job was, that meant or led to why he was so supportive of Sir Alex Ferguson during those dark, difficult early years?
Yeah, I know he had the period at Preston. I know it didn't work for him, but I've never asked him about this, never spoken to him about it, never heard him speak about it either. But for me, he was a one-club man as a player. And the idea of him leaving Manchester United to go and work somewhere else, and I don't know this for a fact, but I just got the feeling that he would always had to have represented Manchester United, that he couldn't go and represent another club, that he was just so committed to Manchester United, and I just couldn't see him having any other club colours on or any other club blazer or tracksuit on. So I don't know, obviously it didn't work for him for many different reasons maybe, or different reasons than I'm suggesting, but I can't see him anywhere other than wearing the red shirt of United, wearing the blue shirt in the European Cup final, wearing the sort of, if you like, the England shirt, but then wearing the Manchester United blazer, representing the club as a director, which is where I saw him. And I think that is, to me, the image that I will always carry in my head of Sir Bobby Charlton, in wearing the club blazer with the traditional crest that the Busby Babes wore. That, to me, is what he carried all the way through his life. And it's something that the club should never forget, can never forget. We have to move on. You have to live in modern times. You have to have modern ways of playing and recruitment. But there are some things that are a thread right the way through, and that is one of them. And I think Sir Bobby Charlton is that thread. And we've lost him today, which is an extremely sad day. But his memory lives on, and what he's done in the game lives on, and what he actually has achieved is phenomenal. There's no other English player comes close to him in terms of his achievements.
Well, as I mentioned at the start, it was here that he played his final game at Stamford Bridge. He was presented on the pitch before the game by the then Chelsea chairman with a silver inscribed cigarette case, which shows how the game has changed in the 50 years since. I don't think you'd be presenting that kind of thing now. But a truly remarkable career, and well covered, Gary, and a very sad day with Bobby Charlton's family very much in our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. That was going to be my final thoughts, that sort of Lady Norma and the family. All our thoughts are with you today, tonight, and like I say, the tributes that are pouring in that I've seen this afternoon, they'll go on for many, many days and weeks, because they deserve to, because he was true great of English football and of Manchester United.
Thanks for joining us on the Gary Neville podcast.